everyone, and welcome. We're going to get started in just a moment. We're going to give people just a few more minutes to get logged in, and we're excited to get started with you in, let's say, 30 seconds. Good evening and welcome to our series on Black maternal mental health. I am beyond excited tonight for this conversation. One, because I think it's one that needs to be had and so often is not. And then two, because of the speaker that we have. So the workshop that we're doing today is called Delivering Joy. We're gathering to reflect not only on the emotional, physical, and almost spiritual journey of childbirth. We're going to talk about the emotional that is not too often talked about, and that's when the joy may get interrupted, right? And particularly as we navigate a system that doesn't always see us, hear us, or honor us. I'm very honored to introduce our speaker. Dr. Joy Baker is an obstetrician gynecologist. She's also a medical director of OB services. Dr. Baker is known not only as a phenomenal physician and known for her clinical experience, but she also brings wonderful passion to the subject of perinatal mental health. Her work is culturally grounded, patient-centered. She is a national voice when it comes to maternal health equity, as well as a number of initiatives that are set up to support mamas through their pregnancy journey. Dr. Baker is a professor at Morehouse School of Medicine. She's a fierce advocate for Black maternal outcomes. And tonight she's here with us. So I am more than thrilled and so appreciative. Dr. Joy, I always say that the bio never quite paints the picture of the person. And so I invite our speakers to share with our audience in your own words who you are, as opposed to the things I've just stumbled through, which are amazing. But I'll give you the floor.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I am really excited about this conversation. I get the opportunity to have lots of conversations with lots of different people and in lots of different venues. But I tell you, this is really probably my passion, talking to folks in the community, talking to colleagues, and it just gives me an opportunity to have some real talk. I love the title that you chose for this, Delivering Joy, Real Talk. And we're talking about protecting our minds and bodies tonight. I have some slides that I'm going to share with you guys, mainly to keep myself on track. But honestly, what I'm hoping to cultivate tonight is a conversation. I want to talk to you guys about the things that you want to talk about. And so I have some slides to sort of keep me on track, but throughout the presentation, there are questions that are weaved, and I am very informal when it comes to these sort of fireside chats. So feel free to drop questions in the chat, or I don't know if it's permissive, Marie, for the people to just unmute themselves or raise their hands, so that we can just have some real talk and some real conversation about Black maternal mental health. This week is the week for us to be aware and very mindful of mental health for Black mamas, and this is an area that I'm very passionate about. The way that I really started to become very active in this space was because I started to recognize that maternal mental health is actually one of the number one causes of maternal morbidity and mortality. And it can be very difficult to navigate high risk pregnancies if the mental health portion of that is neglected. I had a patient that I was so very keyed in on all of her blood pressure numbers, her blood sugar numbers. I was, managing all of these medical conditions, but I totally lost sight of the fact that her mental health was in poor condition. And even though I did all of the safety bundles and did all of these things, our outcome was not what I wanted it to be or what anyone would have expected or wanted it to be. And so this is a space that I'm very passionate about. Um, and so I would like to disclose that I am a speaker and consultant for Sage Biogen. They are the makers of the new FDA-approved postpartum depression medicine, but we won't be talking about any medications in this talk, so I don't think it matters. And what I hope to do is to talk about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and to talk about how folks may present with risk factors for those. We'll talk about a little bit about some screening and cultural significance. And really, what I hope to talk about is historical context for distrust in the medical system and resources and opportunities that we all have. And so when we're thinking about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, the most common one by far is probably postpartum depression, but perinatal depression or depression within the pregnancy or after the pregnancy is very, very prevalent. About 1 in 5 women or birthing people will be affected by depression in the perinatal period. And so we know that maternal suicide and overdose actually exceeds hemorrhage and hypertension as a cause of maternal death. Now, I do want to make a caveat that, when it comes to Black maternal death, that the number one cause of Black women dying is actually heart disease. But this mental health piece remains a very important piece for everyone, for every person who has capacity to birth. And so the American College of OBGYNs, which is sort of the OBGYN governing body, recommends that everybody is screening for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders at least once during the pregnancy and at least once after the pregnancy. And so perinatal mood and anxiety disorders is sort of, or PMADS is sort of a way of just sort of describing many different perinatal mood disorders that can occur. And so under that umbrella can be things like your depression, PTSD, anxiety, psychosis, bipolar disorder, OCD, or even chronic insomnia. So it's sort of an umbrella term under which we group all of these. And so, since we're talking specifically about Black maternal mental health, I want to just highlight and lift the role of intersectionality. We hear about this all the time. Kimberly Crenshaw coined this term, and it's the intersection of race, gender, physical, and mental health, along with socioeconomic status and other factors that can create cumulative or additive disadvantages that are associated with poor outcomes for us as Black women and birthing people. And so what I think is real important to remember and to consider is that the maternal child dyad is just that. It's a continuum. So whatever is affecting mom is also affecting baby and vice versa. They're a unit. And so those same stressors that can increase mom's risk factors can increase the infant's risk factors. So when we're talking about maternal and infant morbidity and mortality, we're talking about this as a dyad. And what I like to explain to patients and colleagues and others is that when you are living in a high stress state all the time, like a depressive state, that actually causes you to have a high stress hormone level or cortisol level. And when your cortisol level gets to a continuously high state, it dysregulates your hormonal axis and can actually increase the risk of preterm birth, low birth weight, preeclampsia, and gestational diabetes. And so when babies are then born early, they often have developmental delays. They can have problems with their nervous system. They can have problems with their, hearing, sight, comprehension, feeding, all of those things. And so this really is a continuum. What affects mom affects baby. And so most of us have been or become privy now to the newest data from the CDC that was released a couple months ago, and that in that statistics are starting to worsen for Black women. Though this wasn't a statistically significant increase in Black maternal deaths, the fact that it increased at all when deaths for Asians, whites, Hispanic actually did decrease, that says something. It says that we are actually dealing with a systemic problem here, and that it is not necessarily all about implementing safety bundles for hemorrhage and hypertension and cardiovascular disease. It is about bias, and we have to come to terms with that, and we have to be willing to talk about that. And, I have a sort of a diagram, the last diagram that we put out for maternal mortality in Georgia specifically, which is where I practice. And it ranked mental health conditions as number 3. But if you look at leading causes of maternal death across the country, it's actually number 1, according to the CDC, accounting for about 23% of deaths. So there is this historical factor that it almost makes me a little emotional every time I play it, but I think it's an important way to start to really delve into the historical factors. So I'm going to see if I can get it to play. For some reason, I've lost my link. That is odd. Very odd. Okay, so I'm not really sure what happened with this, but anyway, the video is about the historical context of racism as it relates to OBGYN care. And I'm trying to understand what happened to my video. And so in this video, it sort of chronicles what happened with Dr. J. Marion Sims, who was an OBGYN who was in Alabama. And many of you have probably heard the stories of Lucy, Betsy, and Anarcha. And it sort of chronicles how much of what we know about OBGYN care and surgery was built off research that was conducted on enslaved women, oftentimes in inhumane conditions and without anesthesia. And so it sort of talks about that. It talks about how the Black birthing person went from a commodity during enslavement to a nuisance in the United States, and how we sort of built these systems that definitely do not honor, protect, and in many cases don't respect Black bodies. And so when we think about the context of having been enslaved, not owning our own bodies, not owning our own children, not being able to have the opportunity to parent, and the level of trauma that is, that's such a level of trauma that it's hard to even unpack. And so epigenetics is actually the study of how that intergenerational trauma is passed down, and how that works to actually sometimes undermine the processes of pregnancy, labor, and birth for folks who have experienced intergenerational trauma, and how that actually gets sort of passed down in our DNA information. And so it's so important for us to consider that as we think about how do we begin to re-envision how birth and postpartum periods can be for Black birthing people. And I have no idea. I apologize to you guys about what happened to my videos, but I had these videos, and this video was going to talk a little bit about the attachment style for Black parents, and how the history of slavery really sort of drove that attachment style, and how sometimes Black parents may have a more anxious attachment style, how we might not always feel safe parenting our kids and being able to raise our kids. I know if you're the mother of any Black child, but certainly Black male children, we have many more things that we have to consider, that we have to think about. Even if you're not the biological mother of a Black child or a Black kid, we have to worry about all of the things that come along with that, like the hypersexualization of young Black girls. We have to worry about police brutality and labeling of our young Black boys. So there's so many things that come along with motherhood. And this, if you are interested in seeing this video, it is actually on my YouTube channel. Delivering Joy MD, and it's a fantastic discussion with Keisha Reeves, who is a licensed professional counselor and owner of Push Through Mama, and she has a fantastic practice here in Georgia where she takes care of patients who are pregnant and postpartum in terms of their mental health. And so I want to kind of pause here to throw in a few questions and kind of hear from you guys and hear a little bit about your experiences, your thoughts. And, when we're talking about mental health reality, um, this is what we're facing. So the first question I had up for discussion is, what are some of the biggest mental and emotional health challenges that you think Black mamas are facing before, during, and after birth? And I am open for anyone to raise their hand or drop it in the chat. I'm following you guys in the chat. I think you're muted, Marie.
I was saying, if you raise your hand, I can unmute you as well as myself.
Okay.
Deanna said
Okay.
structured racism.
Absolutely. And when we think about how we've got, how the structure happens, we have to think about those three eyes of four eyes of oppression. I don't know if anyone's ever studied that before, but the four eyes of oppression, the first one is ideology. It is the idea that one group is less than another group, one group is not as worthy as the other group, and that is sort of preached to the entire society. And so then when you have this idea that one group is not as deserving or not as good, or maybe even three-fifths of a person, then that idea sort of gets institutionalized, and that allows societies to build institutions around the idea that someone is not as good, that is not as deserving, that this Black mother can bear more pain than this white mother, that this Black mother has thicker skin than this white mother, that these Black children don't need the same pain control for broken bones as these white children do. And so once you build institutions around that, then you see that play out in the way that people relate to each other interpersonally. That's why you see people using racial slurs or having inappropriate conversations within healthcare settings. So once we have that interpersonal play out, what happens is that then the folks in the marginalized group start to internalize that. Well, maybe I don't deserve this much. Maybe I don't deserve these things. And one of the most poignant conversations that I've had probably in the last few years was, I always talk to my patients in my office about, how do you see your birth going, or what do you hope to get out of your birthing experience? And, I had noticed that some of my non-Black mothers were saying things like, oh, I'm hoping I can get in the shower and let the hot water run over me. I want to have my birthing ball. I'd like to have my doula present. I really would like to try to avoid any interventions. And nothing is wrong with that. But then I also started to notice, maybe about 5 years ago, that when I would ask the same question of my Black moms, I would get this answer a lot. I just want to survive,
Mm.
which is so sad, right? Because it's just like all of this, there's been a lot of reporting, very important reporting that has happened about, the Black maternal death rate and bias in birth and what's happening. And I think that those are all things that are very important that we should be exposing, that we should be talking about, that should be the hot topic. But we also have to think about what that does to the psyche of those moms and seeing all of these news reports and hearing all of these stories. And then you have moms who are going into this process thinking, man, am I going to die? And so, when we're talking about structured racism and the internalization of that structured racism, these moms, when they're talking to me, are often just saying, Please just let me live. I don't have any other expectations. I'm not aware that I deserve all of those other expectations that other moms are talking about. And so we want to be thoughtful about that. And I see Chelsea says fear of concerns not being taken seriously or coming off as troublesome. And I would love to hear more about that. Would you be willing to tell us more about that, Chelsea?
Oh, there, okay. So someone raised her hand. Let me see who it is.
Okay,
She will. She raised her hand, so I'm going to
great.
unmute. Chelsea, you should be unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, so I'm currently pregnant with our baby number 2, and I thought I would have everything figured out this time, but it's almost more fearsome because we had complications last time with our first, and there's concerns that I have that I don't feel necessarily safe bringing up. For example, we had our blood tests done, and I noticed that I was vitamin D deficient, but the doctor never went over our blood work. So for 2 or 3 visits, we didn't talk about it. I was the one to bring it up in our last visit, like, should I be taking more vitamin D? And it hit me that, she never asked about prenatals and things like that. And I just felt too nervous to say anything because I didn't want to come off as accusatory or defensive, even though I know that these are important things for our baby.
Mm.
Wow. I think that kind of speaks to the trust that you have with your OB care provider. That's something that's really important. The physician-patient relationship is just that, it's a relationship. And we ought to be able to have dialogue, honest dialogue back and forth. Otherwise, it's really hard for you to feel safe if you don't trust that you can bring up something. And I think that there is a way to have any conversation. There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, hey, I saw that you did lots of labs on me and I noticed my vitamin D was low. I really want to make sure that I'm optimizing everything in my pregnancy. Would you like me to start a vitamin D supplement or what should I do about that? There's nothing wrong with that. That's not accusatory. It's not rude. Um, you know, Doctors and midwives, those are people too. We're people. Life is lifing for us just like it's lifing for you. And some days, you might not be on your A game, and there's nothing wrong. I always actually consider it a privilege when a patient says, hey, did you see, someone asked me today, hey, did you see my labs? Can you let me know if everything looks okay? I didn't find that accusatory. And so I think it also has to do with the ego of the care provider that you're talking to. And I think if they have humility, then they're totally fine with you bringing that up. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, with bringing up your concerns, and uh, it doesn't have to be an adversarial sort of thing. You can have a conversation just like, hey, doc, I was just wondering about this. I wanted to ask you this. And one of the great things that we can do nowadays is just sort of come in, have your questions written out. So, say, hey, I have several questions. If you're feeling nervous and you think it might take you a while to sort of get all your questions out, talk to the staff and say, hey, the next time I come, I have several things I want to talk about. Can you give me a little extra time? Give me an extra 15 minutes. I have some things that I want to, talk about. I have some questions I want to ask. I want to make some plans for me and, my partner and our baby. So there's nothing wrong with any of those things. So don't be afraid to use your voice when it comes to. And remember, while those of us who are taking care of pregnant and postpartum people, we do this every day. You don't. This is a special moment. This is a special moment in the life of your family, and that needs to be respected. Okay, so it's okay to say, oh, I know, that you have lots of patients and lots of things going on. I want to be efficient, but I do need to ask some questions and I need, to be able to talk one-on-one with you. There's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think any most normal care providers would not be offended by that. If someone is offended by that, you probably need to transfer right away. All right. How have stigma, silence, or cultural expectations shaped how we talk about mental health in our families and communities? This is a big one. So if you were to raise your hand and weigh in on that, um, I would love to hear that. I think this is a very interesting topic in the Black community.
Natasha, I see where you had your hand up before. Do you want to chat about this one, or did you have a question or comment from the prior bullet?
Um, I guess like this is sort of combining the first and second question.
Mhm.
I'll try to be brief, but I think about like how the culture of motherhood is very white. And, like when we talk about, even preparing our bodies and kind of just like going through the motions of, nothing wrong with it, of, setting up appointment and pediatrics and how, I think about for myself, like how we don't have conversations about actually prepare, like holding the woman as she's transitioning to a mother and kind of just like the loss of cultural practices. Speaking for myself, my family is from the Caribbean, and so there's a lot of cultural practices where we prepare for birth and take care of the mothers after birth, and it's not necessarily something that's medicalized or something that is like homogenous to the culture. And I think about for me, like I'm thinking about having babies and bringing babies in this and up in this culture and society. And so for me, I think more so of like the spiritual and cultural implications of the I don't want to say the word ritual because I feel like that's such a charged word, but like the spiritual and religious, holding that has to happen when thinking about these transitions. And I think that motherhood is such a big transition that the culture is not, there's nothing in the culture that is sustainable for mothers, from working and being the career mom to a work at home mom. Like there's no sustainability and really thinking about mothers and thinking about how to make the society more accessible and sustainable for birthing people.
Wow, that I do absolutely agree with you on. Last year, I got a chance to go to Arizona to a mental health conference that was by Postpartum Support International, but it was called PSI in Color. And it was all about the cultural aspects of birthing and mental health. And I can recall walking into that conference space and just see it. I mean, there was all sorts of ancestral things that were present. There were libations, there were trees. It was all about the spiritual aspects and the cultural aspects. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this is what's probably missing from many birthing spaces. And I thought, wow, this is so interesting. And everyone in the room was a healthcare provider of color.
Mm.
And so it was an amazing experience. And we have to think about what happens when we start to strip away our culture, what happens when we start to strip away at the family unit and how that works and how important it is to have those cultural elements. And I think that we have often tried to veer away from some of our culture to whitewash birth. And I think that part of the healing process for us is to begin to return to some of those cultural traditions where your grandmother and your aunts and, the people in the room are there, and there is a spiritual aspect. My mom loves to tell the story of when I was born because they were having trouble getting me out and they were going to take her to do a C-section. And she didn't know the doctor. She didn't trust the doctor. She ended up sort of being emergently hospitalized. And she says, your grandmother went into the bathroom and she prayed And by the time we got down the elevator to go to the operating room, you were coming out. And so she has a very strong sense of that spiritual presence that actually helped her in the birth. And I think that, many of us come from those sorts of cultural roots. And I think it is very important to honor those and to
Mhm.
think about how, how we birth in these spaces. And so there's nothing wrong with having that. I think sometimes people are worried that they'll be viewed as weird or, you know, um, different or even a problem patient. But there's no reason why these things can't come into the space, whatever it is that you need, as long as it's not open flame. If you're planning to birth in a hospital, it's probably okay. I have people with LED lights and diffusers and sound machines and all kinds of things, whatever it is that you need to feel safe, whatever it is that you need to feel at home in that space. It's really, really important. I see, is it Diani saying that I think silence in terms of mental health has caused mental health conditions to worsen amongst family members or friends. There is also a spiritual belief that they will be healed by God or spiritual being or the spiritual being, any spiritual being that you believe in. Ooh, now that is real. That is some real stuff right there. Being raised in the South and practicing now in the South, I practice in a small town in Georgia, and I hear that a lot. Well, you need Jesus, you need to pray about it. And the first thing I say as a certified lay minister in the United Methodist Church is the Bible says faith without works is dead, right? And we ain't trying to be dead. So what we're going to do is we're going to work and pray, do
Mhm.
the work that we need to do, seeing a counselor, we're going to journal, we're going to, uh, talk to our elders and ancestors. We're going to do it all. We're going to do all the work because we want to be able to survive this. And what we had to be understanding of is the fact that pregnancy changes our DNA. It changes the chemicals in our brain. And there are those people for whom medication is appropriate. I personally think therapy is appropriate for everybody because we all have so much going on. We're living in a society where so much is happening all the time, and we are now bombarded by information all the time. We're all so busy. We're all rush, rush, go, go, hurry, hurry, that we sometimes don't even take time to process what is happening in our lives. We're letting life happen to us instead of us living our lives and being in control of that sometimes. And I think therapy is a great way to slow down and to think about exactly what is our intent and how do we move with intention through our lives versus just sort of, staying on the hamster wheel. So, therapy, I think everybody can use, especially in this day and age and all the things that we're looking at. Um, and, medication for some folks is necessary. And I tell people all the time that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be on medication for life. Some people do. Some people have a chronic, what we call neurotransmitter or the chemical in the brain. Some people chronically have those off and they need to stabilize those. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so I talk to people about, hey, let's use all of the tools that God has given us to be able to move through what we're moving through. So I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about mental health. I think we need to talk about mental health. One of my broken videos in here is a conversation that I had with a patient on a PBS show called Well-Beings, and she was talking about generational curses. And I think a lot of generational curses have a lot to do with not with the devil trying to break up your family or break into your mind. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't happen, but I think a lot of it has to do with us continuing to respond in the same way that we saw our parents respond, that they saw their parents respond, and those are coming out of a traumatic place for many of us, especially those of us who are the descendants of enslaved folks. And so we don't necessarily want to continue down some of those paths. There are wonderful things that we have gained and continue to pass forward from our ancestors, but intergenerational trauma is not one of them. And so we have to start to break down some of those traumas that have existed in our family and to be able to move in a different way. And sometimes that takes a myriad of resources, from counseling to journaling to medication to prayer, being involved in a spiritual community, all of that. So there's nothing wrong with yes, we can be healed by God. I do believe that God is a healer, but I also believe that God sends things and people to help us heal, and we should avail ourselves of those things. Uh-oh, sorry. And then the final question for this segment was, what role do you think that trauma, both personal and generational trauma, play in maternal health for Black women? I'm just curious to hear what folks think about that. I know we kind of touched on that, but it's very, very interesting to me to hear from folks when they kind of talk about that. If you'd like to share, raise your hand so Marie can unmute you.
Let's see who this is. Nikki Johnson. Hi, Nikki. Thank you. I feel like I'm doing one of those radio shows. You could be a
Well,
radio.
you could be a radio host. You
You
have a
are
great radio
giving
voice.
Do it. You could.
radio
No, I'm
host
thinking you could.
vibes.
I'll be the producer. You do the show. Nikki, can
Yes.
yes, we can
Good
hear you.
afternoon. Yes, thank you so much for this everything and this time to share this space. It is very important, very dear to many of us. Going through my own personal birthing journeys, I felt alone, but now doing the work that I do, and I realize that far too many, too many are experiencing trauma and all kinds of drama as well. But one that I know, speaking with the moms that I work with, and from my own experience, lived experience, is fear. The fear, especially moms that younger moms may not be as knowledgeable or educated in the knowledge of the delivery space, or just not having that lived experience yet. So for them, I feel even more, but even for the moms who are knowledgeable, I've gone into it knowing so much and hearing nurses and doctors and women, educated women, still going through the same, like, each of our experiences are different, but the way we're treated and talked to is too familiar, too much the same. So fear, number one, is the one that stands out to me. The fear of not being able to advocate the way we know we can and the way we should for ourselves and our babies, because of fear of retaliation, fear of neglect, some medical malpractice, some just things of going wrong, and that fear of not making it. This is supposed to be a joyous time, bringing life into the world. We should not be worrying about, uh, you know, eh, during our pregnancy. Oh, do I need a will? I need to get a will before I deliver this baby. I need to have a trust and things in place just in case I don't make it. That is horrible. Those two things should not go together. And so, yeah, for me, it is the fear, then the disrespect, the mistreatment. So yeah, I can go on and on. I'm very passionate about this, and it is triggering, talking about it, but I know knowledge is going to help me through my trauma. It's like therapy, but also helping in the future, helping the mothers, that I work with, and the families I work with. So yeah, fear stands out the most. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for sharing that, Nikki. That is a huge, huge deal, right? Fear. And some of us have already mentioned that you fear being mistreated, being neglected, being allowed to suffer. All of those sorts of things are fear driven. But I wanted to sort of flip the coin and say, what would happen if we began to talk to our care team about those fears? I would submit to you if you have a conversation and say, hey, I really want to have a sit down conversation with you, Doc. I'm reading all these things in the news. I've heard all these stories. How are we going to make sure that I don't become a statistic? Nothing wrong with that. It's not accusatory, but it brings to light the fact that, hey, as a Black woman navigating in this birthing space, I have some fears and I'm afraid. And I want to know that you, as my care provider, can understand that you can empathize with me, whether you're a person of color or not, and that you have a plan to help me feel safe and to help me birth in a non-traumatic way.
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As a matter of fact, I really would love it if birthing, birthing care providers would initiate this conversation sometimes. Tell me about your fears. Tell me what's been on your mind, what's been concerning you. And yes, it takes some time to do that. And so, a lot of my colleagues are overrun, overworked, got patient schedule every 15 minutes, no bathroom break, no lunch. Like, I get it. But if you're really serious about doing this work, then I think we also have to be intentional about giving our patients space to talk about those things. Now, can we spend an hour every single appointment? Probably not. But there needs to be that give and take of today we need to talk a little, we need to dig a little bit deeper. We need to talk a little bit longer. I need to hear from you about what's happening with you. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think we should be able to have space to do that. And I think that a lot of times it comes down to choosing the right care team. Another thing that I really, really love is a doula. I love me a doula. Like I absolutely doulas are amazing. One, they're able to really provide childbirth education that maybe I don't have time to do in my busy practice. But they're also there to help amplify the voice of that birthing person. And, sometimes even as I've been doing this now a little over 15 years, and as far as I've matriculated in my journey and thinking I'm the woke OB, sometimes I'm moving fast and I'm not listening. And that doula often will say, I just want to bring attention to the fact that she said that her hips are hurting or something like that. And that reminds me, it's not a adversarial type thing, but it's more of a, oh yeah, you did just breeze right over what she said, Joy. Bring it back. Let's figure out what's going on here, you know? And so that's huge. I think I see in that, I can't really read the whole name, but I think it says imagined or I imagined.
Im- Imagined possibility.
Imagine possibilities.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't see the rest of the word, but I love what you're saying. Would you be willing to unmute and kind of tell us a little bit about this analogy to life support?
Is that a yes, Karen?
Peace and blessings and imagine possibilities. One of the things that I do is I do a sister circle, and a lot of those individuals have been given the narrative that it's about survival and they live in survival mode. And one of the things I want them to understand is that there's a difference between surviving in life and thriving, having a surviving family and or creating families that focus on surviving as opposed to thriving. So I used the analogy of life support. And I asked if they've ever seen anyone on life support, whether it's on television or in their personal life. And I was like, and at some given point in time, are individuals asked to take people off life support? And of course, they say yes. And I said, and are they really alive or are they surviving? Are they existing? And they say it can be either or. I said, but what happens if they're disconnected? they say that they could die. So we are the same if we are not being proactive in our lives to obtain information and be able to advocate and become empowered, because we are relying on something else to sustain us, as
Mhm.
opposed to acquiring those things that help us thrive, but then we can transmit those things to other individuals so they too can thrive. And the support circle around you should be empowered to do that so that you all thrive.
Absolutely. I love that so much. And as you wrote, trauma can be a catalyst or it can paralyze. I have had one patient that I think of when I read that is a patient of mine that had a really tough first delivery and birth. And then she joined a sister circle. We were doing centering pregnancy on her second baby. And so she had sort of a sisterhood circle that surrounded her. And she used that past trauma as a catalyst to say, you know what? I'm going to take really good care of myself. I'm going to be gentle with myself. I'm going to be loving towards myself. And her second pregnancy and delivery was a breeze, and things went so well. And so it can, where maybe if she had not had that support of her sisters in her group, it might have been a paralyzing sort of moment. Like this might turn out really horrible. Just, like my last labor and birth was not what I wanted it to be. It didn't turn out how I was hoping and all of that. And so I think that you're absolutely right. And we have to get past the point where we're just surviving, but that we're actually thriving in settings. And I think that takes a whole systemic approach. We ourselves need to know how to prepare our mind, our body, our spirit, our relationships, our finances for motherhood, right? And then we need a team surrounding us that is willing to really dig into the details and to be there walking beside us versus sort of talking at us or down to us. And that gives us education and information. And then let us make the choices. I think most of us know within ourselves what we should do, what's good for us, what feels good to us, what feels right to us, our intuition or Holy Spirit or whatever it is that you call that inside of you. I tell my patients all the time to trust that because that's a very important thing to have. That's sort of our instinct for what will be best for us. So I think those are some really key points for us to pay attention to. I'm gonna keep moving. So, just a couple of risk factors for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And, obviously, if you had previous depression or anxiety, that is certainly a risk factor. If you have life stressors, who doesn't have life stressors during pregnancy and postpartum? Everybody does, right? If you have Medicaid insurance, and I think that sort of more points to socioeconomic status, right? But let's be honest. Oftentimes, when it comes to perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, it's not necessarily where you live, what you know, what you have, but it is about how you feel about the pregnancy, how you feel about the care and concern of those who are supposed to be walking through the pregnancy and postpartum with you. If you don't have support, or if this is an unintended pregnancy that you feel forced to carry, there are just so many issues that can be at play during a pregnancy or in postpartum. And certainly after traumatic birth experiences, preterm births, babies in NICUs, there are so many things that folks may be dealing with. And so it's very important that we're checking on our sisters, that the healthcare team is asking questions with screening and sort of thinking about, what might this person be at risk for? At my hospital, we have a traumatic birth experience team. And so this is a social worker, a licensed clinical social worker, a labor and delivery nurse, and then we kind of rotate the midwife or physician. But this team sort of helps to follow those patients who have had really traumatic birth experiences. And we also have to hold space for the fact that not that I might not see it as a traumatic birth experience because I'm at births every day. I'm assisting with births every day. But that person might have had trauma in that maybe the birth didn't go the way they wanted. Maybe they really had a birth plan that they wanted to see happen, and maybe they ended up with a cesarean delivery for the baby's heart rate being in distress or something like that. So that might have been trauma to that person. And so we kind of offer that service to anybody who feels that they've had a traumatic birth experience, or to whom that we're worried that they may have a harder time in the postpartum. And so screening is critical. And like we said, at least once in pregnancy and once in postpartum, there are several validated tools, but we know that some of the validated tools that are in traditional medicine may actually underestimate the mental health conditions of Black women. Black women, maybe 1 in 3 Black women may experience a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder that requires treatment. And so, one of the things that I had an opportunity to do was to work through a fellowship at Morehouse School of Medicine to do a transformational healthcare leadership fellowship. And I did mine on just improving screening. There is actually some data that shows that just screening by itself and putting a name to the feelings that people are having, just screening and saying, hey, I think you might have a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder, actually improves outcomes by 9%. Just naming it, just saying, hey, let's see what we can do to help you with this. I think that's what you have. And so in this particular study, we screened all pregnant persons at their initial visit at that 1 hour nasty sugar drink test that everybody is asked to take. We use a lot of jelly beans at my office, but the that 6 to 28 week 1 hour visit that you do for checking for diabetes, and then before they go home from the hospital, and then 3 to 6 weeks after they birth. And so folks who had a positive screen were actually interviewed by their midwife or OB, and we provided them with a list of local counseling centers, and then offered medication therapy if their score, was moderate to severe. And then we followed up several weeks later and asked for questions about, did you go to counseling? If so, how was it? What was your experience? If you did not go, why not? What held you back from going? And what we found was that out of 178 folks surveyed, we had 47 that were positive, or 27%. And then when we looked at the demographics for this population, you can see that our African American patients, 70 African American patients were screened, and 24 of them, or 34%, actually scored positive. And you can see we screened 99 Caucasian women and only 20%. So the numbers actually hold up to 1 in 3 versus 1 in 5, which is what's often quoted in the literature. And then we had only 7 Latina patients, but 43% of those 7 screened positive. But here's what I really want to draw attention to is the number who attended counseling. For African American women, it was 0, like a big old 0. And we had 7 out of 24 who agreed to initiate medication. And you can see that their white counterparts initiated treatment about double the amount of time. So that's something that I really, like to talk about, because it just kind of draws attention to the fact that although we're more likely to experience these symptoms, we're less likely to talk about it, less likely to be treated. And there are many reasons for that, I think. I think that culturally, it may not be the coolest thing to say, hey, I'm having a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder. Maybe we don't feel comfortable saying that to our family, to our faith community. But then also, we have to think about the stigma that comes along with initiating medication or counseling, Does that mean that something's wrong with me? Does that mean that I'm going to have the ability to parent the way that I need to? Does it mean that I'm crazy? We already know about the increased incidence of involvement with DFACS and other regulatory bodies when it comes to Black parents. And so there is some real fear. It's not necessarily just all in your head when we're talking about being willing to talk about what's happening inside your mind and your heart. There are some real things to fear. And so I think that it is important to do that in a safe space. I'm a big fan of a warm handoff. If you have a friend or a family member who's seeing a therapist that maybe you can get a referral to, I think it is much more it's much more or much less scary when you're talking to somebody that you know or you're talking to someone that you were referred to by a friend. And we ask all the questions about, hey, who did your hair? Or where'd you get that outfit? And we sort of research from friends and family about that. Why not research about some of the other things that we need so that we can find a safe space in which we can share our feelings? And so, as I said, women of color were much less likely to initiate medication or counseling. And that's just very low initiation of traditional counseling, right? What about some of our other cultural avenues that we might have? And so when I talk about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders for Black women, I like to note that this is that umbrella term that happens during pregnancy or up to 1 year after birth, and that 1 out of 3 African American mothers may be suffering from postpartum depression or perinatal depression, compared with 1 in 7 of white mothers in our country. And so 60% of us are not getting any treatment or support services. We are at higher risk for having worse symptoms. And, when you don't treat perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, those can directly impact not only the health of the mother, but the health of the baby. We know that in that first 6 months of life, that is the time where your babies are forming their attachments. They're forming the way that they relate to others. They're learning tons of language. There's so many neural connections that are being made in the brain. This is the time to really be present and to be able to bond with and love on and enjoy your baby. And when you are disconnected mentally and emotionally, that can really impact that. And let's not even get into all the ripple effects. I had a patient that I was treating who had perinatal depression, but postpartum, she really suffered with rage and irritability. And she was a single mother of 4. And she was on the verge of losing her job. And I said, you know what? Let's get these FMLA papers, girl, because you cannot afford to lose your job. This is how you feed your family and take care of yourself. So we put her on FMLA, we got her treatment, and within a few weeks, she was like a totally different, totally different person. And she was smiling and she said, thank you for not giving up on me. Even though I was irritable, I was mean, I was just, going through all these things. She had alienated all the people who were supporting her, her mother, her partner. And so she really needed that care. And once she was able to get it, she was able to get back to work. She was able to thrive in her relationship. She was able to repair some of her familial relationships. So, this suffering is something that we must be able to give voice to and to start the process of healing, because it makes a direct impact not only on us mentally and emotionally, but physically, financially, relationally, all of those things. So very important for us to recognize the signs and symptoms. Folks who are having low mood, sadness, tearfulness, loss of interest or joy in things they used to really love to do, if they are agitated or anxious all the time, if they're always feeling like they're moving in slow motion or lack of energy, can't concentrate. And these are some of the functional issues that happen when people have perinatal mood or anxiety disorders. If they're constantly worried or feeling like the other shoe is about to drop at any moment, something bad is going to happen. I can't possibly be this happy without something bad coming down the pike. If they can't turn their brains off, they're staying up. And sleep is such a huge part of mental health. When we don't get sleep, our brains do not work well. As a matter of fact, they did a study of OBGYNs who were taking call overnight and then working all through the day. And they said by about 24 hours, we might as well be drunk. because we haven't slept, we haven't rested, we haven't turned our brains off. And so, if we are not sleeping well, not getting sleep, if there's not support for sleep, that is a big problem. And that's a huge contributor to mental illness during pregnancy and postpartum. So just to be aware of those things, check on your sisters, check on your friends, check on the people in your faith community, because a lot of times they feel like they should be superwoman. There's this strong Black woman syndrome that I wish would just dry up and die, because all of us, are sort of characterized by this tropism of we're supposed to be able to handle it. We're supposed to be able to take whatever is thrown at us and be able to bear it and move forward. There is certainly frank, systemic, and institutionalized racism that is occurring in many birthing spaces. And then, can we even trust the people in our medical community? You know? What if we have a baby that has special needs, or there were complications with the delivery? We're having trouble breastfeeding. What if life is stressing us out? I can't tell you the number of people that I see that are worried about housing and food security. Like, there's so many things that play a role into mental health disorders. And that is why, we are seeing such high numbers of these mental health disorders. And so I want to pause for a couple questions. How am I doing on time, Marie?
We're actually at time.
Oh no, I ran my
But
mouth.
but
So,
not
okay,
a soul has left. And so
okay,
I think we're with you. If
okay,
what do you guys say? Vote, give us a quick heart. But I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. I want to hear the rest.
okay. Well, I have time if
Look at
you
all the
have time.
hearts,
I
Dr.
have
Joy.
time.
No, nobody's
I
going. You
have
need to talk
time today. So I wanted to just hit these questions, and maybe we'll end after this. But this was what the whole crux of the talk was supposed to be about, which is, protecting our minds and bodies, right? So I want to know from you guys, because I'm always looking for strategies. How do you protect your peace and your joy and your mental health? How did you do that while you were pregnant, or while you are going through pregnancy now, or in the past? How did you do that? I see Nikki put that hand up real quick.
Yeah. Let me invite.
Yes, I am ready for this question. Thank you. Because I am still, my baby's 18 months. I'm a mother of four, so I had the luxury of having children years ago and then starting all the way over now. And so I got to have that experience of being a young mom and then an older mom. So I feel I have a lot, a lot to share and still going through some things. And it took a lot of time, especially this last time around, to think about myself as far as self-care, especially if you have a baby who does have some special needs, well, not special needs like mentally, but some NICU issues, so my baby had to spend a little time, unfortunately, in the NICU, which could have been avoided, but we're not going to get into that today. But I had to forcefully take care of myself, because if you have a young child and you've been traumatized and you have the fears and you have all these things, it's all about the baby. I know it was for me. It was just like, no, I don't even care. Like, what, did I brush my teeth? What, brush my teeth? Wash, take a shower? Who got time? Who could think about that stuff? Like, I had to really think and remember, did I brush my teeth today? Did I shower today? Did I nope, I haven't combed my hair. Forget about the hair. So it was just, everything was about my baby because of the mistreatment and everything she was going. I was afraid to leave her because every time I left her, there was something done to her. Just the fear, right? So it took a lot. And it finally looked like it was overdue when it finally did happen. And it looked like, okay, it's okay. I'm gonna go, just spend some time with myself. I'm gonna clean myself. I'm gonna bathe. I'm gonna try to relax. And it looked like forced, because the whole time I'm still thinking about my child, thinking about finances, thinking about bills that I have not checked, bills that have not gotten paid. And at that time, I didn't care. I was like, whatever, they're gonna get paid when they get paid. But it's hard. Even when the body kind of relaxed, the mind didn't. My mind was still like racing of things I need to do. Is my baby okay? Is she gonna be okay? you know um yeah, anxiety and postpartum depression, which I was later diagnosed with. But then I think I was misdiagnosed because it ended up being what is it called, demer, which a lot of people do not know about, which is when you're breastfeeding and this overwhelming feeling comes, you feel depressed, it lasts for a couple minutes and then it goes away, then it comes back again. So it could be misdiagnosed as postpartum depression. So yeah, so my experience, that was the last one. And 4 deliveries, 4 children, each one was different, but the first one being very traumatic and the last one being very traumatic. The two in between, not so much, kind of not knowing, kind of like lived in bliss, might have been going through some things, but just bliss, ignorance, just whatever, getting through, pushing through. But really being more knowledgeable now as I'm older, and yeah, having to force it. So that self-care and taking it was forced. It was forced, and it was something that I had to continue to practice and learn to take advantage of, and learn to know that it's important. I need to do this. And then gradually, each time I took time for myself, it getting better.
Excellent. I love that you really kind of dug into, hey, I've got to take care of myself in order to be able to take care of others. Anybody else want to share about how you protect your peace and joy and mental health?
See if I see any hands. While I'm looking, I'm going to say that we've had this conversation with our group before, and came out with some ideas. And one of them that just seemed to resonate with me is no is a full sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Saying no, not feeling the need to be um, everything to everybody at once. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the interview that Shonda Rhimes did, where I think she was being honored, and they asked her how she's able to be a mom and have the career success that she does. And she said, "I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in focusing on what I have to at the time," or something to that effect. And she said, "So if I am focused on a project, I know I'm not mom. So I build in that support network to take care of mom. And if I'm being mom, I have a team at my work who can take over and keep that going." And I think sometimes because we've been raised to think I got to do it all. And so it's perfectly fine to hand off the laundry, to hand off the housekeeping, to hand off cooking, to hand off everything. So that you can focus on those things that really are critical. So Chelsea has her hand up. And Chelsea?
Oh, yes. Oh, just in case if anyone is like in the same spot as me and is unsure of whether or not to do the same choice that I'm choosing this time around with our pregnancy. The first time I got pregnant, I decided to completely go off of my antidepressants because I was so afraid about, negative effects on the baby. And I knew that there were quote unquote safe options out there, but I still was so worried, about, I don't know, giving her autism or ADHD or anything like that. And so I didn't take them. Seeing that she's still wild and free no matter what, I didn't even have chocolate because I was so worried about the caffeine the first time around. And she's still just a wild, loving baby. This time I did decide to go ahead and choose one of those safer options in medication with antidepressants. And I will say that it's really making a difference and helping me out a lot this time around, especially because my support system that I had in my first pregnancy is not there this time. And I can't imagine navigating all of that without, that extra help with the medication. So that's something I've definitely done for myself this time. um, of course, we haven't had the baby yet, so I still have that fear of like, I hope I'm doing the right thing for me and my baby. But I know that a happy, safe mom is better than what I was before. So that's all. If anyone else is in that same position, I just want them to know there's other people out there that are deciding to go the medication route while pregnant.
Oh my gosh, Chelsea, thank you so much for being so brave and sharing that because so many people need to hear that.
Mhm.
A lot of times people will self-discontinue their medication, or sometimes healthcare professionals will say, "Oh, you're pregnant, you should stop it." As I alluded to earlier, we know that untreated mood and anxiety disorders can really impact the pregnancy. It can dysregulate those hormones that keep your pregnancy going and keep them healthy. I don't know of any antidepressant that causes preterm birth or, preeclampsia or gestational diabetes. But I do know that living your life in a high stress, high cortisol state can do all of those. And so when I talk to my patients, I talk to them about the fact that either we're going to expose the baby to the illness or to the treatment. We shouldn't expose them to both. So if you already have been on meds and you didn't even know you were pregnant for several weeks, why stop them? And then we expose the baby to the illness and the baby's been exposed to the medication too.
Right.
So it's like, let's stay healthy, let's stay mentally healthy so that you can navigate the way that you need to and take good care of yourself. And there are some options that have been more studied. I wouldn't even say safer options because we are still studying some of the antidepressants, but there are some options that have been studied more that we feel more comfortable with in terms of like what happens with babies' outcomes. But I totally recommend finding a healthcare provider that's well versed in those treatments, and to talk about your concerns, talk about the risks and benefits. That should be a risks and benefits discussion, and then make a decision based on that. But more than anything, your baby needs you healthy. Your baby's completely dependent on you. And if you are not in the mindset to be able to go through this pregnancy, taking good care of yourself, being gentle with yourself, that is going to impact the pregnancy much, much more than an antidepressant would. So, what kind of support do you guys wish you had maybe had during a previous pregnancy? What kind of care do you wish that maybe you could have had, or maybe you had a great care experience and want to share that with the group?
Hey, hold on just a second, Nikki, I'm coming.
Thank
There you
you.
go.
Thanks for letting me share again. Definitely having a doula and a lactation consultant to follow up with. Out of the 4 pregnancies, I've only had a doula once, and I was like, wow, where were you before I needed you years ago, So definitely a doula during pregnancy or postpartum. During the pregnancy as well, she was there helping me to advocate, also advocating for me, and to just relieve some of the stress during the delivery, like rubbing my feet, like great massages, just making some protecting my space and the atmosphere for me, like how I wanted, helping me go, with my birth plan and things like that. And also postpartum, the times where I felt like I couldn't do it all and wanting to be the super mom that we all want to do, be superwoman, she offered to do a lot of things. I was like, no, but just her taking the baby, holding my baby while I got to sleep, just getting that rest that we needed. So definitely a doula, definitely a lactation specialist, and yeah, those are the main things. There's so many things now, and they're positive apps, not just TikTok and Instagram where there's a lot of misinformation. But there's an app I was trying to look for it that helps you. You put the medication you're on, and it tells you everything for when you're pregnant and for if you're postpartum, and if you're breastfeeding and things like that. And you just plug it in, and it tells you all the side effects and if it's safe to take during and things like that. When I find it, I will definitely share it in the chat.
Oh, fantastic. We would love to see that. I have one similar. It's called LactMed, LACTMED,
Okay.
LactMed. And then there's also, I think, Mother to Baby.
Mother to baby. That's the
Yep.
one. That's the one.
So
Mother to
yeah,
baby.
those are very, very
Yes.
helpful. And one thing I'll share with you guys, I have a group of OBGYN friends. We all trained at Morehouse School of Medicine. And for their first babies, we did baby showers. For their second babies, we waited about 2 weeks after they were born, and we all got together and we all had assignments. And some people were, organizing the closet. Some people were cleaning up. Some people were making freezer-ready meals that could be defrosted, right, like put in. And so I'm the meal prep person. But we would come, we'd have a postpartum party. And then one person was responsible for taking mom to get a manicure and pedicure, or even just taking her to to a hotel for the day to sleep and shower and just be in, just be in peace. And we have done that now probably close to 15 years. And it is the best thing. So if people are like, oh, I want to give you a baby shower, say, oh, give me a postpartum party. Because I want to have that, just that knowing all my close friends and sisters and family are coming to support me when I really need it most, and just sort of get things organized, do the laundry. People always want to come see the baby. Well, make them come see you too. Say, hey, oh, you're on your way. Stop and pick up something for these other kids to eat because I'm tired and I'm not cooking today. And then you can hold the baby while I take a nap. Don't be afraid to use your voice. We don't have to do everything all the time on our own. Engage your support network. And I want to get to this last question because I think this is super important. I want to give some tips and tricks for this, but how to advocate for your own needs in medical settings. I'll poll the group first. How would you advise others to do that? And then I'm going to tell you from a, director standpoint, the fastest way to get where you need to go when it comes to advocating for yourself, or if you experience something that's inappropriate. All right, anybody want to share a little bit about how they advocate for their own needs when they go into a medical setting?
Let me see if Karen is still here, because I know Karen, it may not be what you do, but I know you counsel. Would you mind to share? I'm going to unmute you. I hate to keep picking on Karen, but she's always at our workshops and she brings such gems. So I've unmuted you, Karen. Would you share?
Can you pose the question one more time, please? I was walking back from the restroom.
Oh,
Oh, no problem. The question is, how do you advocate for your own needs in medical settings? What advice do you give to other people on how to do that?
Well, how I advocate for myself is, one, being as informed as I can be going into that medical setting. And one of the first things that I do, if it's a new doctor, I've already researched the doctor
mhm.
and kind of know their background. When they walk in, I don't allow them to just start doing business. I will stop them and I will say, well, good morning, and I want to know their educational background. And I'm that person that always asks if they have any outstanding lawsuits, because I'm
Oh,
trusting you with me. And I tell people, you have that right to ask those type questions. And then I'm also a doula. And so I say to my birthing families that that they are providing a service and they want you to buy it. So they need to convince you why their service is the best service and why you should purchase it. And if they can't do that, then you need to get another provider. And they need to explain things, and I don't care if they have to explain them 10 times until you understand exactly what it is that they're saying. They need to keep explaining. I also have my birthing families keep a binder that has all of their lab work, all of their exit notes, et cetera, so that if they are in a practice that has multiple docs that see them, that when they go in, they don't have to rely on the doc actually reviewing their records first,
Mm,
because they have their records with them. So I tell
mhm.
them, you need to be as concerned and prepared for your care as you expect your doctor to be. My job is to assist you in getting there. Make sure you're writing down your questions if you have questions, but also making sure that you are taking the time to become educated and informed, and understanding that you have as much of a right to ask for a safe outcome as they would want their own family member to have. And sometimes I tell them, have them explain it to you like they would explain it to their daughter.
Absolutely. My dean of my medical school said that if you can't explain it to a third grader, then you don't understand it yourself. And sometimes medicine can be a whole nother language, the way that we speak in our charts, and the way that, you might see things written in notes and that sort of thing can be it can be daunting. It can be overwhelming to someone who doesn't speak that language, right? So it's very important to use basic terms that people can understand. I think that's so important. And I tell you, I love a doula. You seem like you're a doula, very similar to the doulas that we employ. My system has free doula care for anybody who wants a doula. And I love it that we've had them now for about 18 months, and it's been the highlight of my last 18 months in practice. Our doulas are gangster. Like they're going to show up for these patients and they're going to speak up for these patients. I had a doula contact me on a Saturday afternoon and said, "Hey, I brought my client to the emergency room and they did not check her heart failure labs." And I was just like, who is this again? And so I was able to call and talk to the emergency room doctor and say, "Hey, I need you to check, to make sure that she's not having postpartum heart failure." And he's like, "Oh, I didn't even think about that." So that doula saved that young lady's life because
Wow.
the ER physician was getting ready to discharge her and she needed to be admitted and treated right away. So doula is one thing that I love them. Can't say enough great things about them and raising the voice to advocate. Nikki, I see you put your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Oh my God. Karen, thank you for that information. Who would have ever thought to ask about their practices, their practice if they have any lawsuits? That's lawsuits against them. That's amazing because they're not gonna just offer that information up, and that gives people the right to choose. But yes, oh my God, the doulas are amazing. They are. I am now a doula as well. I'm a new doula because of my experience and because of the work. So one thing that stood out to me to answer that question was to speak up. So it's very hard because of fear and things like that, right? But to remind the medical staff and the nurses that yes, I understand that this is your job. You get to go home. This is my life. When
Mhm.
I finally said that to them, it was like, oh, I feel like they're finally listening to me because they had disregarded before I made that statement, they disregarded everything. They threw my birth plan in the trash and told me they threw it in the trash. Boldly said, oh, yeah, we threw it away, like as if that was nothing. Then, against my wishes for vaccinations, they went and did that. Then they also, against my will to exclusively breastfeed, they went and gave my baby Similac. She has stomach issues now. So they just took everything that I said and just disregarded it. So once I made that statement, it was like, oh, okay, everything switched. The game changed after that. It was like, okay, this mama's, you're just not gonna walk over this mama. So I encourage now my families to speak up, regardless of fear and of retaliation or anything like that. Like it lets them know, you're dealing with a human being here. We're not just your job that you do, you leave. So yeah, that I think I'm gonna get t-shirts made because it was so profound. It was like, I get it. This
Mhm.
is your job, but this is my life you're dealing with, my life and my child's life. So yeah.
And remembering that this is a very sacred, important time. And I have
Hmm.
to sometimes remind myself because my mind is like, okay, I got to run over here and attend this delivery. And then I've got X number of people that are waiting back at the office. And then I've got, to make dinner when I get home. And then you've got, our brains are doing all the things. And I have to remind myself. And so one thing I try to do in births is to lower the lights, to quiet myself, to sit down while we're, in the process, because that sort of just that motion of sitting down and quieting things down helps me quiet my mind to be present in a sacred space and to be able to connect with this person in front of me and the experience that they're having. So that's a huge deal because we know how busy we can get. But one thing I was going to say about the lawsuits, and the truth of the matter is that there is what's called the National Practitioner Database, and you can actually look up whether someone has had lawsuits. And unfortunately, when you're talking about obstetric providers, honestly, 75% of us are going to be sued at some point in our career. What you want to know is what the payout was. So, did that person have to pay money, or did they have to go to some sort of we have these things for doctors. They're like classes, like you get in trouble and you have to go to these sessions, and that gets put on the National Practitioner Database. Have they ever had action against their license?
Mhm.
Like, so has the state medical board that they're practicing in actually suspended their license, or have they ever lost their license? Have they been treated um, for
Substance.
substance use disorders, things like that? I mean, you can actually see that. So, I mean, I think that most of us are going to be sued, but you should know like who actually had a poor outcome. Sometimes people will sue you for all manner of stuff, right? But you want to see the people who had those $1 million settlements, those people who had to pay out of pocket, those people who were sent to special programs because they were doing things that were inappropriate or illegal. Those are the people you want to watch out for. Um, and then just to give a couple of tips. So, as Marie said, I'm the quality safety director for women's health at my hospital. And so there is a chain of communication everywhere you go. And especially if you're planning to birth in a hospital, it's good to know that chain of communication so that you can escalate things as they need to go. So first, there is, you and your primary OB care providers, be it your group of midwives or physicians or whatever. Um, and then in the birthing space, you have usually a labor and delivery nurse or two. Above her is going to be the charge nurse who's on that floor. And then above the charge nurse is going to be the unit director, whoever oversees the mother, baby, and nursery unit. And so you can always say, okay, this nurse is not hearing me. I don't feel like she understands what I'm trying to communicate. May I speak with the charge nurse, please? Nothing wrong with that. And it's okay to say, I'm not sure if we're communicating well together. Is it okay? Could you please have the charge nurse step in? You know, Nothing wrong with that. It's not argumentative. It's not angry. It's just saying, hey, I don't think that we're vibing right now. Can you bring the charge nurse? And then the charge nurse, there's always a unit leader that's on call, and they can certainly reach out to that unit leader. If the problem is with your midwife or your OB, there's a department chair, and that is usually the person who is sort of responsible for corralling all these people and making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. Most hospitals also have a quality safety officer that's there, and so you can actually file a complaint. I get complaints from patients all the time, and then it's my job to flesh out, was the appropriate care delivered? Were people treated ethically and compassionately? So, there are avenues that you can take. If you feel like the whole entire system is crooked or crazy, then Center for Medicaid Services. You can actually file a complaint with Center for Medicaid Services, and they will respond swiftly because that can interfere with a hospital or a practice's ability to accept certain insurances. So these are all sort of chains of communication that you can go through if you're having trouble with both the physician or midwife and the nursing staff. There's always an administrator on call at that hospital. So that might be that's someone from the C-suite, either the CEO or the chief financial officer or the chief operating officer. There's always an administrator that's on call. They take call for, things that are happening that need to be addressed by administration right away. So even if it's nighttime or weekends, there's an administrator from the C-suite who is on call. So you can escalate your concern as high as you need it to go. And I don't, obviously you don't want to be like a adversarial type of person. I mean, because we all deserve dignity and respect. But if you feel like your voice is not being heard and you're not being respected, politely escalate. Politely
Mhm.
escalate. Say, I'm just not sure that you're hearing my concerns or that my needs are being met. I'd like to talk to the charge nurse. I'd like to talk to the unit director. Would you please page the administrator on call?
Bless you.
Nothing wrong with that,
Bless
you
you.
know.
I love that. I love that, Dr. Joy. A couple of things that immediately came to mind as you were talking. One, we have a visual to that effect about the bedside nurse, the charge nurse. So I dropped that in the chat. A couple of things, if we could go back. when we were talking about, I think it was Nikki that was talking about her birth experience. We should, just like you said earlier, Dr. Joy, if you get a bad haircut or a bad weave in my case or whatever, we're going to tell people about it. Nikki, I can't believe they threw your birth plan in the trash. I can't believe they didn't treat you with some greater degree of dignity. Tell people. Tell those people at church, talk about it. We do our testimony when things go well. I think we should talk about when things do not go as they should, should. And so that there is an app. And so I dropped that in the chat. The other thing, that I would highlight is that Karen shared, make sure that your OB is credentialed or has privileges at the hospital that you want to deliver in, and give that some consideration, because I did drop the link in where you can do the research on whether the doctor has been cited or has had disciplinary action. So you can look that up yourself, right? And I do echo, as someone who's been working with doctors for 40 years, I have a really, really good friend that was sued by a mama who had had 4 miscarriages. She was drug exposed. My friend got her through her pregnancy, got the baby born, but they broke the child's collarbone in delivering the baby, and she sued. So you can't go by whether the person has been sued or not. Look at those, as Dr. Joy said, the more significant things. So we do have that link. But then, as Karen points out, make sure that your care provider, whether it's a midwife or a physician, is credentialed or has permission, or it's not permission. What is it called, Dr. Joy?
Privileges.
Privileges. I knew
Like,
it was a P word in
yeah.
the hospital, because if you're having twins, for example, you sort of don't want to go to that community hospital that doesn't have a well trained NICU. And then we have had issues. I live in Arizona where we've had some practitioners who they don't have privileges, period. So they see you up until the point where you're born. You don't realize that this person that you're seeing is not going to meet you at the hospital when you deliver. And they don't tell you until you call them to say, I'm in
Oh,
here. Yes. And it's happened where I live. And then my daughter lives in Manhattan. And we've heard of it happening there.
Karen,
So,
done.
and Karen, I'm sorry,
You-
go ahead.
Oh, I was talking to I didn't realize it wasn't mute. I
Oh.
was talking to my niece. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. I thought you were echoing it, but thank you for putting that in, because that is a critical point, is make sure that they may seem wonderful and have a fantastic office, but I know from firsthand of at least 2 instances where mamas were seen by someone, and then when they went to deliver, they said, "Oh, I won't meet you at the hospital. There's someone there who's trained and blah, blah, blah." And so you're going into someone you have no relationship with. What was the other thing in the chat that I wanted to highlight? What was the other thing? I can't remember now. I missed it. But I am trying to keep up with all the gems that you're giving, Dr. Joy. So, and I know we've gone over, but I can't, we lost 2 people. So it means everyone else is finding what you say, gems. But I am also want to just say that our beautiful Dr. Joy is a newlywed, and we might want to let her go home to her beautiful husband. So we could stay here all night, but maybe if we promise Dr. Joy to do a part 2.
Oh, I would love to. You know what? I speak all over the country, and people buy me lots of nice dinners and pay me lots of money. But this is actually the thing I enjoy doing. Because when I'm done with those paid engagements, I'm like, oh, 45 minutes, I'm done. Sign off. But I love to talk to people and hear from you guys and kind of hear about your experiences, and start to, to think about how I, because it really informs the way that I show up for my patients. So I really appreciate you guys being able to come out tonight and to share. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I don't know. There's lots of love in the chat. I'm sure you see all the hearts and celebratory. This was an amazing, amazing conversation. Thank you for taking time, because I do know in my prior life I worked with those physicians like you that we paid handsomely and flew around the country. So for you to spend time with us is not something I take lightly. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys. We'll send the recording. We'll send these links as part of our email as well. And if you don't have a doctor as wonderful as Dr. Joy, up until, what is it, Dr. Joy? Let's say it really quickly. Is it 28 weeks? They can change practitioner,
Oh
right?
Lord, honey. That's a lie. Okay.
Oh, what is it?
So yeah, so a lot of people will block people from transferring in if they're over 28 weeks. The reason why is that you don't get paid
Right,
fully.
right.
So I have taken people at 39 weeks and 4 days. Like you can accept any patient up until the moment that I've had people switch to me while they're actually in labor.
Wow.
So yeah, so it can be done. The reason why is if you don't meet a certain number of visits with that patient, you don't get the full global bill. And that's a
Ah.
whole nother conversation. We could come back and do, like why is women's health in the state that it is now? It has a lot to do with the reimbursement. So people don't get fully reimbursed if you're at over 28 weeks, but you can accept a patient at any time.
And so I would, so to that point, yes, Stacy, it is a money thing. To that point, the other research before you get pregnant, if you have that opportunity, and if early in your pregnancy, ask those critical questions. Do the research, as Karen mentioned, around there any disciplinary action. You can ask for a tour of the hospital. And so if you're going through the hospital and you see that, the unit, and you see that all the mamas are set up, are hooked up to IVs, and that's not the vision you have for your pregnancy, maybe you don't want to go to that hospital. Ask the doctor where else they have privileges. And if they aren't on staff at other hospitals, choose someone who's at the hospital that you want to deliver. Because my daughter toured 3. Because mama was in medical sales, right? So I ran through all of them, and we knew which one we wanted, based on NICU acuity, because we were having twins, but then we also wanted her to have a birth that reflected her individual needs. And so we ended up going to choosing our physician based on that. But I just want you to be as informed as you possibly can, right? So thank you all so much. Have a great evening. Thank you, Dr. Joy. I'll talk to you soon, and we'll work on a part 2 very, very soon.
Thank
All
you
right.
all so
Thank you
much.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
Good night.